Hello everyone, I'm Akshit Patel. So this is going to be a two-part tutorial on Introduction to Table Views for the iPhone SDK. So let's quickly begin. So let's quit this and let's open up Xcode and let's create a new project. This is going to be a view-based application, so choose the view-based application template and make sure the product is iPhone from the drop down and click choose, and let's call it table views. Okay, so there's our project. Let me resize this a bit. Okay, so there's our project on the desktop, table views. Now as you can see, I have a folder called images on the desktop, and here are the images that we are going to use for the Touch Plus network websites in our table view, and they are all provided by Touch Plus network, so thanks to them. And as you can see, there are two more files over here, touchplus.png. Let me rename this touchplus. Okay, so touchplus.png, this is going to be icon for application, and default.png. I'll explain what this file does later on. So let me close this and copy this folder into our resources folder in the project. So when you're presented with a prompt, make sure that this checkbox is checked, copy items into destinations group folder. So what this does is that it copies all the files into your project, so that if you move your project, you don't lose the files for the application. So let's click add, and there are files. Let me bring this down and this too. Okay, so there's our images folder, and there are all our images. So resize this, and okay, and there's our default.png file. So what this file does is that it shows this image when our application launches. So if you don't have a default.png file in your project, all iPhone does is presents your user with a black blank screen when the application launches, while it loads up the application in the background. So you don't want your user to see a blank screen in your application, and this will reduce the user responsiveness of your application. So you make sure that you always have a default.png file in your project, and this should be size of the iPhone screen, that is 320 by 460 for iPhone 3G and not for iPhone 4, as the resolution has changed and I haven't updated my project. And here's our touchplus.png file. That's going to be the icon for application. So let me give you the dimensions. This is a 57 by 57 file, and it can be anything you want. Just make sure you refer to iPhone human interface guidelines, and these are the images that we are going to show in our table view, and these are all 34 by 34 size PNGs. Okay, let's resize this and let's launch our project and see what we have right now. Okay, there we go. There we have our default.png file. So it works now, but we have a plain screen right now, so we don't have anything over there. With this, and as you can see, even though we have the icon file in our project, we cannot see the icon in our application in the iPhone simulator. It's just a white plain box. So the way you do that is with this, and let's click on table views info.plist. So this file provides our application with all the information it needs to install on the iPhone, in this case our iPhone simulator. So as you can see, there's a blank field for icon file, and here we need to pass in the name of the file that we would like to use as the icon for our application. So double click and let's call it touchplus.png. So this is the name of the file. Let's save this and rerun our project. There we go. So there was our default.png. Let's quit this, and as you can see here, we have our icon with a nice gloss and rounded corners, so it looks pretty good. So save this. Let me close this and expand classes folder. So here we have our two app delegate files and header and implementation for our view controller. So let me resize this and let's begin our project. Let me stop this project. Okay, and let's begin by adding a table view in interface builder. So let's click TableViews View Controller.xib or nib, certain people like to call it. Okay, and there's interface builder and our view. Okay, and if I click on files owner and go to the fourth tab on our inspector, that's identity, you can see that the class is TableViews View Controller, and that's this file over here. So here where our main meat for the application goes. Okay, let's return the first tab. Okay, now all we would like to do is drop a table view from the library. If you can't find it, just click on the search box at the bottom and type in table view. There we go. So drag a table view and drop it onto our view. So let's save this and let's rerun our project. Okay, we have our table view, but as you can see, I cannot scroll it, or there isn't anything in it. And just so that we are on the topic, there are two types of table view: a plain table view and a group table view. So as you can see, there's a slight change over here. Let me show you once again. So there's our group table view and a plain table view. I prefer group table view, so let's leave it to that, and you can have it to any style you like for your application. Save this. Let me go over here, stop, and build and run. Okay, so there's a blank grouped table view with this. Okay, and now we need to have an IB outlet so that we can get a hold of our table view inside our code. So we know that the table view is an UITableView, and let's call it table. Okay, and let's set the property for our table view. So all this does is it sets the getter and the setter methods for our table view. So it's going to be non-atomic variable, and we would like to retain it, and it's, and make sure you type in IB outlet UITableView, the same thing, and a table. Let's save this and let's type in our synthesizer. So synthesize table. Okay, so I like to keep my code more readable and less messed up, so the way I separate various methods is that I use pragma marks. So you might be wondering, what are pragma marks? Well, if you can see the drop down over here, if I click it, you can see that it presents us with the list of the methods. So if I click on table, it takes us to the synthesizer statement for our table, and let's click dialog. So it takes you to the method that's represented over here. Well, all pragma does is that it separates various methods into categories the way you would like to do it. So if I leave it blank over here, you can see there's a blank line, and if I click on it, let's go somewhere else in the code and let me click on the blank line, and it takes me over here. Well, what if you put a dash over here? Well, it creates a separator line over here, and it makes it look a little bit better. And after the separator, I would like to have the category for synthesizers. So this is where I will synthesize all my variables or instance variables. So as you can see, there's a line and synthesizers, and there's a table synthesize statement. Okay, and let me delete the methods that we don't need for our project right now. So we don't need load view, and we don't need init with nib name. Okay, so there they go. We definitely need viewDidLoad method, but we'll use it later on. And here's another method that you might want to implement in your, sorry, I messed up. Okay, there we go. And Here's another method that you would like to implement in your project, but I'm not going to do it this time. All this does is tells the iPhone which orientations we support, but we are not going to use this in our project. So let's delete that. And let's use pragma once again. So there's the dash for the separator, and let's call it memory management. So these are all the three methods that we are going to manage our memory, and one more pragma and a separator for view lifecycle methods. Well, not necessarily, but let's just call it. And if I click on the drop down, you can see our methods are separated. So synthesizers and there's a separator to separate the synthesizers from view.load, and there are memory management. Well, okay, save this and let's do a bit of memory management. Did receive a memory warning. This is the method that's ran when our application is having too many allocations without release of memory, and this is making a burden for the application. So iPhone quits our application, but it runs this method so that we can do the last minute saving and everything. But for this application, all we want to do is trace memory warning in our console. Okay, and save this, and view did unload. So this is complete opposite of view did load method, and here you can set all your outlets or instance variable to nil. So in this case, self.table, since this is an outlet, and set it to nil. And we also run the super method. So this is the method run by the parent. In this case, the topmost parent is going to be an NS object or a view UI view in this case. Let's run view did unload. Okay, save that, and you release our instance variable in the dialog method. So table release. Let's save this and let's jump over to interface builder. And if I click on the files owner and I right click, it opens up the HUD window, HUD, heads up display. Okay, so there's our variable table and there's a connection for it. Well, you click on it and drag it onto our table view. So there we go, there we have our connection for our table view. Let's save this. Well, this doesn't do any change in our application. Well, table view, all it does is that it renders the cells or the rows from the data source and the delegate. Well, you might be thinking, what are the data source and delegates? Well, if I select the table view and go to the connections tab in our inspector, you can see that there are two outlets, data source and delegate. What data source does is that it provides our table view with the information it needs to represent. That's all data source does, and the delegate makes sure how the data is represented. Sorry for my mistake. And let's see, let's make our view controller the data source and delegate for our table view. Okay, save this. So since we are the table view, data source and delegate, we need to confirm those protocols. So the way you do that is you use angle brackets or pointy brackets, I don't know. So let's say UITableView, and this is the protocol UITableViewDelegate. And if you want to confirm to more than one protocol, the way you do that is you separate it by commas. So UITableView data source, there's auto completion, and save it. So what do we do after we confirm to a protocol? Well, let's check in our developer documentation. So let's press option. So option, okay, so my mouse turns into a crosshair, so should yours. And let's double click on UITableViewDataSource. Okay, so there's our pop-up, and let's click on the book icon for the window. Okay, so here's our UITableViewDataSource protocol reference. Here you can go over the overview and okay, so here are the methods to implement for UITableViewDataSource protocol. And as you can see here in the italics, there are two required methods and all the other methods are optional. Also, in case of UITableViews, the UITableViewDelegate methods are optional as well. So the only two methods for simplest possible table view you need to implement are these two: table view self for row at index path and table view number of rows in section. So let's hover over it and see what it says in the tooltip. So asks the data source for a cell to insert in a particular location for a table view. So this method asks the data source for a cell for each row. So whenever it renders a cell, it goes to the data source and asks for a cell. And if I click on it, you can see the data source returns a UI table view cell. And the second required method is number of rows in section. It tells the data source to return the number of rows in a given section of a table view. So what this method does is returns an NS integer or a number that tells that how many rows are in a particular section, and this is run whenever each section is rendered. Well, so let's implement this in our class. So let me go over to the implementation and let's create a pragma a separator, and table view data source methods. And just so that we can know, let's say these are the required methods. Okay, so the first one is, so the way you search for them is dash, which shows that it's an instance method, and T. So I hit escape, and there are all the table view, delegate, and data source methods. So the first one, if I remember correct, is number of rows in section. Well, so let's comment it out. So return the number of rows in a section. In our case, there's going to be only one section, so we don't need to worry about the second, third, or fourth section or further on. So let's say we have only one section, so return 1. And the second one was cell for row at index path, and let's comment it out. So returns cell to render for each row. Well, and let's click on UI table view cell and let's go to documentation, and if I'm not wrong, each cell has certain properties, and in this case, let's see, each table view cell has an identifier. It identifies the cell which we are going to use, and it can be an NS string. So let's create a static, and what static means is that this variable is available only inside of this method and not any other method. So NS string, and let's call it cell identifier, and I want to give it the same string, so let's just copy and paste. So there's our identifier for our cell, and let's create our cells so that we can return it at the end of the function. UITableView cell, and let's call it cell, and it's a pointer type. Now many of you would do this: UITableView cell, we would allocate it and init. Now there are various ways to init it, but let's just keep it simple and say init. Well, this works completely fine, but what if you have hundreds of rows? Well, the table view would create a cell for each row, and that would be a lot of memory allocation. Well, we don't want to do that and overburden our iPhone, so there's an easier way to do that. Let me delete this, and the way you do that is table view, and this is the variable which is not created by us, but it's already in the framework TableView, and we use the method dequeue reusable cell with identifier. And what this method means is that whenever you scroll a table view, all the cells that go off screen are collected, and they have, as I said, that each cell has its own identifier. So in case we want to use the same cell with the same cell identifier, instead of allocating a new one, we can use the same cell, just modify the data inside it. So since we have only a single type of cell, that's the cell identifier, we can use the cell identifier. So whenever our row goes off screen, the cell is rendered again at the bottom of the screen with the new data, so it doesn't allocate it again and again and again, and it doesn't cause any problems. Well, what if we don't have enough cells to render? Let's say none of the cells in our table view are scrolled off the screen. Well, we check through if statement. So if there is no more cell to render, then we create the cell and allocate it. So UITableView cell, and we allocate it and init. Well, and if I hit escape after init, you can see there are 5 different ways. The most common used one is init with style. That's what you use for default cell. If you're using custom cells, you might wanna use init with frame and reuse identifier. But since we're using the ones provided by Apple, let's say init with style and UITableView cell style. And if I hit escape after style, you can see there are 4 different styles: default, subtitle, value 1, and value 2. You can play around with them in your when you want to try over something else, but in this project we are going to use default for now at least. And you use identifier, so we pass in the identifier again, cell identifier. And the last one is auto release. So what auto release does is that it allocates it, but you don't have to worry about releasing it. Whenever the application goes through another function, the cell is released on its own. The cell is sent into an auto release pool, and it releases it when it enters to another cycle. You may check the documentation for this method if you like, but I'm not going to go over it. And let's just return our cell. So we are just returning a plain cell here, nothing more special. Save it and let's run our project. There we go. There's our single cell, because all we did was number of rows in section. We just returned for a single cell, single row, and there's our cell. So that should be it for the first part of this tutorial. In the second part, I'm going to teach you how to load up our cells from an array and also set the text, images, and the subtitles for our application. So that's it for the first part. Meet you in the second part on the other end. Thank you.